So, lately you have gotten a bit of a drama thing, because in the game in Spider-Man 2, I forget the name of it actually, specifically, but there's a specific character that in the Spanish version of the game that speaks in a way that Spanish doesn't really work, in a gender neutral way that is essentially made up in order to have, well, actually, gender neutral terms that we don't really have in Spanish. And a lot of people don't like this. And there's a bit of drama because of this. Because Elrubius, one Spanish YouTuber, essentially, when this happens, when he sees that this is happening in the game, he disables the character that speaks this way. And of course, Asmon, of course, also reacts to this, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think he has a bit of a misunderstanding on why this is the case, why this happens, and why this is in the game in the first place. He says that the reason why this is happening is because of, Western ideas from the Americans, being forced upon, Spanish speakers without their consent, really, without their agreement of this situation, which in my opinion is not quite true. A little bit, but not quite. And we'll talk about it. But first, let's see what they say about the, let's see the clip.
Spanish streamer Rubius mutes Spider-Man 2 after hearing gender-neutral Spanish.
No sé, pero el hombre al mando, Harry Osborn, tiene buena reputación. Y encima ha contratado a mi científica de abejas favorite.
As you can see here, it says, "He encontrado a mi científica de abejas favorite." Putting an E at the end of these words actually doesn't really mean anything. It's one thing that's made up, because usually we would say O or A instead, which you would signify whether it's a man or a woman. But in Spanish, we don't have a, O, which would be the man version, will also be the neutral term, the neutral gender term. So you can't really tell whether it's a man scientific or a neutral term scientific, scientist, because you don't know, because you don't know their gender, right? You can't really tell, right? But científica with an E would signify that you do not know whether it's a man or a woman. Of course, Elrubius doesn't like this.
Mayor experta en el desorden de colapso de colonias. Sí, toca el ukelele que te mueres, como saben quienes
Like how
siguen en
he
redes sociales.
does the same thing that Asmon does with the little eyebrows. I didn't see that before.
Para el legado de tu padre. Pero por ahora
Okay,
vas
looks
bien.
cool.
No olvidéis pagar el alquiler el día 1.
Nope.
And then he goes in and he disables that specific character that talks this way in the game. And then Asmon comes
Turn
in
that shit up. So basically,
with his take
is this
about
like
the situation,
a
right?
continuation of Western cultures appropriating the Spanish language and the Spanish culture to incorporate non-gender conforming language? Is this more of it? Yes. Okay.
Now, to be fair, when he says that, essentially is, the idea comes from the West, comes from the United States, and essentially is being forced upon these developers, or upon these, translators, which, in my opinion, is not really, we don't really have that evidence. We don't really know what happened here. And he essentially he starts essentially apologizing for this, for forcing this idea upon them. Which in some regards, if this was the case, I think it would be relevant, it would be warranted. But because we really don't know why this is the case, it could have perfectly been the case that the people who are actually translating the game are indeed in agreement with this idea, and that's why they put it. That's why they put the gendered neutral term, because there's not that many people that talk this way, and there's not that many people that agree with it in the first place. But it is true that this movement started around 8 years ago, without the influence of United States or anything like this. And he also says this in the video, it's not like Spain is not part of the Western culture anyways, right? Even in my country, in Chile, we have had this for a long time, ever since 8 years ago. And we are not that progressive compared to what Spain is, for sure. So I think it is definitely a bit of a mistake to attributing it to it's the United States fault. I don't think that is fair, and it's a bit of a scapegoat for what is actually happening, in my opinion. I would definitely agree that if that is the case, that they, the developers forced people who actually, force this idea upon the translators, I think that is definitely with a little bit of a bad taste, right? And of course, because of the fact that, well, that's not the way you do this kind of changes. There are actually, in my opinion, because I kind of agree with the idea of putting gender neutral terms, but the execution is very important. You can't force people to change the way they talk. You just can't. It won't work. It will not make people agree with your ideas, and therefore it will not stay forever. This is kind of what happened in my country. People tried to force these ideas, the neutral gendered terms and ending of words with an E to other people, saying that if you don't do it, you're a bit of an asshole, you're a bit, it's not the right thing to do. And it didn't work. People essentially made fun of them, and it kind of died out very easily, very fast. Even though there are actually some good arguments to argue that the Spanish language has some issues with the fact that they don't have any gender neutral terms. Because, for example, in this case, let's say I want to talk about a scientist, like in the video, and I'm not sure whether it's a woman or a man. If I say with an O, which is the neutral gender term, you will not be able to know whether it is a man or you don't know which gender they have. There's some information that is missing there that, in my opinion, shouldn't be. This also happens, by the way, in English to a certain extent. If you want to refer to a mailman coming to your house, and when you say a mailman is coming, you could be referring to that person is a man, or that person is, you don't know whether it's a man or a woman. But there's no neutral term for it. At least in English, you have the word they. So if you don't know, you could say, a mailman is coming, they, blah, 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 blah. And in that case, you would be saying, oh, I don't know whether it's a man or a woman. And if you say he is coming, you will know that they are a man, right? In Spanish, you don't really have that. You will say él or ella, right? You will not say, you have no neutral term. I guess you can say usted, but that is a very formal way of saying the word, right? So it doesn't really work out. And that is what this movement is trying to fix in certain ways. Now, to be fair, and I will say this, I don't think most people care about this, this lack of information that you get in Spanish. I think most people use it as a more like a political thing of you don't want the neutral term to be the male version of it as well. I think that's what they mainly care about. But that doesn't deny that the Spanish language does have a lack, does have an issue, does have something that is lacking, right? And to be fair, I don't expect Asmon to know all of these things, right? And in the video, he does a very good job at identifying this and essentially saying, I don't know if this is the case, but if it is, this is how it should be. And honestly, even in the whole video, it is kind of hard to disagree with him too much in very, very specific places, and the idea that the United States is the one that is really pushing this agenda, right? I do think even in the same video he actually explains this very well, and he kind of retreats a little bit of his past comments. I think even in this clip right here.
It isn't as always evolved from Latin to Spanish, for example. All languages evolve. Well, isn't it the right of the people who speak the language and are part of the culture to collectively agree or disagree on the way that it evolves? And
that is completely true. It is part of the Spanish culture, the Spanish people that actually speak this, to make this decision. There's nothing wrong with that, and that is exactly what it is. Now, here he is implying that was not the case in this case, but we don't really know that. It's kind of hard to know.
Every single evolution of language is not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. It depends on what the evolution is. I think this idea that saying that evolution evolves, it is a living language, I think that you are right about that. But whenever these decisions are being made, and it seems that, seemingly, right? Seemingly, a very...
As you can see there, seemingly, he is saying, I'm not sure about this. I am guessing that this is the case. And he's not wrong, because we're going to see what he says now.
Small fraction of people want this. Like, I think this is probably a single-digit percentage of people that are probably native Spanish speakers that actually want their language to be forcibly changed because of Western values.
Now, there it is. Western values. probably would disagree with that. And then he actually around here he does say that, oh, whenever we talk about Spain, that is not actually the case. Spain is part of the Western values anyways, so they're not really being forced. But it is true that not a lot of people actually agree with this in the first place. Yeah. Now, to be fair to the game, I actually don't think it's that big of a deal to have one character, well, actually, I don't know if one time, but having one character in the game that speaks this way, I think that's kind of fine. It is honestly kind of in character, in my opinion, to have a character that does this, right? I don't think it's that bad. You can disable it, and as one does say, like, oh well, I don't want politics in my game. Every game has politics, and sure, you don't want it to be shoved down your throats or whatever. But look, every character in video games will represent a change in societal values on how people behave, how people talk. Like, there's a reason why we have like characters like, I don't know, fucking Jennifer in Witcher 3, which is very like independent woman, and kind of like in the way that most people like it too. She's like fucking based as fuck. She doesn't care about anything, and she just goes and does what she wants. I think that's kind of cool, right? That is kind of cool. And you might disagree with this character specifically, in particular, but I think that's okay to have one thing that you disagree with in your video game. Unless you're having like literally every character speak this way and being essentially forced down every moment of the fucking game, I don't think it's really that big of a deal. I don't think it's that big of a deal. It is a moment that does exist. It is a type of person that does exist, and you can disagree or agree with it. I don't think there's anything wrong with having it there. It'd be different if the game, well, maybe there are moments in the game that is essentially saying this person is right, but as you can see here, for what they say in this clip, it doesn't seem like it's anything very. They're just talking, right? They're not saying like my ideology is the way that everyone should talk. It's more like I'm just talking this way, and it is what it is, right? I think that's completely fair. That they have this, that they speak this way. I would not go around, like if I were to go around in the city and I speak to someone and they speak this way, I'm not gonna be like, why are you speaking that way? Why are you so stupid? Look. They want to speak that way, that's their choice. I'm not gonna, but they can, okay? And I'll respect that. And if one day everyone ends up speaking like that, I personally wouldn't care anyways. The only way I don't talk that way right now is because I don't want to deal with it. But that's it, right? But there you go. To be fair, I don't think Asmon. Yeah, and of course, also this is crazy, guys. You need to stop doing this. There's this Asmon clip. There's like this person who's saying like when they're saying I'm mentally ill. When he says mentally ill people, as one says, it's like, oh, I want to apologize to, people who are like essentially forcing our culture on top of you guys, and those people are like essentially mentally ill. This other person, like on Twitter, essentially says, implies that whenever he says this, he's essentially speaking of trans people. I think that is completely unwarranted. It makes you look like crazy and makes everyone disagree with you to the extent that your interior point gets diminished and you fuck over the movement anyways, even if you do agree with it. Don't do that, guys. He obviously wasn't saying this. I think it's a bit unhinged, to say the least, to imply this, right? So, not good at all. That being said, tell me what you guys think. Tell me if you disagree with me at all with this. And see you guys around. Subscribe to the channel. Bye-bye. What would I end up the video with? Honestly, I think Asmon, for what he said in the video, mostly is kind of right. He doesn't know or have all the information, which makes him be wrong in very specific points. But I think those points are important and worth mentioning. We don't really know whether this change of language was asked by the developers and essentially enforced into the translators to do, or if the translators were the one who wanted to push this idea in the first place, saying that maybe this was indeed a progressive character, and so like, oh well, this might actually be a good thing for this character to behave as, right? It's the same thing with, like, I don't know, you guys, well, you guys wouldn't know because you speak English, but in Spanish Simpsons, there's a lot of little phrases that don't appear in the actual Simpsons, but the translator saw that the character would behave this way, and translating it, would they essentially changed translations because it would fit better for the character and the language. This could be definitely one of those cases too. It could also be a political thing, like, we agree with this. is the way you should be, whatever. And you might disagree with it, that's fine. And in my opinion, the best way to make these changes in the first place is not really by, putting it in a video game where most people don't already agree with this movement anyways, because of, they feel like they are being attacked. It's not the way to make these changes in language. The way you do it is explain your position, convince them first, and then start using it. At the end of the day, most of the people that hear this kind of language will get very defensive about it and end up not liking you or your ideals because of it. It's not the way to do it. I personally would love if we actually had a neutral term in Spanish for, to be more clear when you're talking, because you can't right now, because there's no such words to do this way, or they're very convoluted way to say, oh, the people, like, it's just too much stuff. It's just too annoying. I would love that, the language eventually would change into a way that is clear to talk, but right now we can't really do this because it's so politicized. It's very annoying. People can't really have a good conversation about this because everyone is like just completely unhinged. And also, to be honest, it kind of annoys me that every time there's something like this, it is, oh well, the Western values, United States is forcing the Spanish people to. We can make our own mistakes too. We can make our own dumb decisions, unless we actually have proof of that. And we are movements of, progressiveness and changing words happened way before this anyways. It might have been even inspired into what the United States was doing, but honestly guys, most of these people that we're talking about that would actually engage in this kind of language hate the United States and a lot of things that they actually agree with, right? So I don't think they would be like very happy to think that people think that they are they're copying them or whatever, even if they got inspired by very progressive values of those places anyways. So by the end of the day, if we are making these mistakes, that's okay too, right? We don't know if it was a thing of the actual developers or the translators, and until we know that, I think it's honestly a little of a mistake to think this much about this issue. Especially because of the fact that it's only one character in one game that talks like this, and you can disable it. It really isn't really that big of a deal. Sorry for the gorgoness, there's a few days afterwards. I'm fucking sick. But thank you for watching. See you guys around. Subscribe to the channel. Bye bye.